Hey everybody, so we are here at the Chestnut Street Log House. This is emblematic of what the entire town here would have all been, these type of log houses. These are German. You can tell that by the fireplace is always in the center of a German log house, whereas an English log house would have them on the ends. This is how they heated their homes, that type of thing. George Stites was the founder of Lebanon. At that time, it would have been called Stites You also had, we visited Light's Fort. That is on the northern part of Lebanon. The Light family, or the Light, the Leicht, they built that, and they sort of were in the northern part of Lebanon. They were both at like different areas of these creeks because that's how towns usually got formed. But George Stites would have bought a whole slew of land from like the Penn brothers, and then he would have laid it out. And this is where the town would have started to be laid out. Town, as it was known then, and then you had Hebron, which we visited, the Hebron Moravian Cemetery. They were sort of competing for which town would wind up being the big town, and ultimately Lebanon or Town won out. But this is what you would have seen throughout this entire street, all throughout this town. Is a lot of the people, there were stone houses. If you were like a merchant or somebody of wealth, you would have that, or for the common people, you would have had the stone foundation and then the log house, because that was what was readily available. And this would have been from mid 1700s, 1780s, so French and Indian War, American Revolutionary War period. So we're going to check this out. You're going to actually get to see the Preservation Trust of Lebanon County. They're the ones that preserve this and do such a phenomenal job, and this is preserved because of them and their efforts. Otherwise, something like this of such historical significance would not be here. And you actually get to see inside this home what a home would have looked like in that colonial era. And like I said, this was emblematic of what you would have seen up and down this street. These are the homes that people would have had. We visited the outside. We have not visited the inside yet. So this is just a tremendous pleasure and a privilege. This is also on the National Registry of Historic Places, and that makes it that it's preserved, so nothing can happen to it. And once again, the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County, they're the ones that preserve this, and this wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their efforts. So let's go inside, everybody. So as promised, I wanted to give a little bit more of a brief history and description of this log house. Built circa 1760. This is actually paper that they allow you to have there that gives this history. So George Stites received two warrants for land, one in 1737 and another in 1741, in which he laid out lots for a village. He began to sell these lots right around 1750. This community was first known as Stites but later would become known as Lebanon. And like I had said, it was sort of a competition between Stites and Hebron to the east, which would be the dominant town. Ultimately, Stites or Lebanon would clearly become that dominant town. I said in about 1772, there were about 220 of these dwellings in this village of Stites. So, like I had said in the video, I'll say in the video and several of these future ones, you just think of it like this house, things very similar to it would have been up and down these streets. That's what they all would have looked like. They would have been German in nature and their architectural style, just because those are the people that lived there. So these lots were sold in a measurement called a perch. A perch is about 16 and a half feet roughly. So these lots would amount to about two perches wide, roughly 33 feet, by six perches deep, about 99 feet deep. So this was important to understand this, because these homes, they needed to have gardens to be able to supply them with their veg and also some fruits. They'd have some trees like an apple tree or a cherry tree, raspberry bushes, to be able to bottle those up. And they could wind out canning them, in essence, in these glass jars to have them throughout winter to feed themselves. So the garden that was there, which we'll go through here in a little bit, uh, it would have all their needs. You would have the vegetables. The one area would have been in the center, would have been a pollinator garden. Around the outside would have been sort of your herbs, sort of some of those
what we would call today sometimes weeds, but it were in essence actually medicinal plants. Cliff does a really great series on the Woodsman channel on these medicinal plants. So he'll go through what their uses were, what they can still be used for today. They knew all these things. A lot of this stuff they would learn a lot of these things from the Native American tribes who would teach them these are the things that can help you. Everything in nature is there to do this. So they needed to have that depth in the property to be able to have that garden. And then Jerry had said about they would have off outside of the village, they would have these outlying farms, which would be for the veg and the fruits that they would grow for sale to support their family. So there was a stipulation that was required that a house had to be built within 18 months of the purchase date, and that each house had to have a stone or brick chimney. And that was probably, I would assume, for safety purposes. And just, I think in a lot of ways, they wanted to have a similarity to the different homes, so you didn't have some gaudy monstrosity there as well. And most of these homes would have been logged simply because the only people that could afford to use like limestone, brownstone, sandstone, something of that nature would have been merchants. And in these first startups of these villages, other than like mill owners and merchants that came into the areas that really had money, you weren't going to have stone houses. Also, you would have a lot of churches because he gave parcels of land to what was now Salem Evangelical Lutheran and the Tabor Reformed Church, which is now LCBC church there on the corner of, I believe it's is it 10th and Walnut, a beautiful stone church. And there's some debate on which is the older church, but both of those land grants were given about the same time. Um, so the earliest lots were located between 7th and 12th Streets on the east and west of the Quittapahill Creek, which was a common practice. The creek was essential for life. You'd have mills, all those different things that you needed, that stuff, or your blacksmith shop would need sort of that waterway to work different aspects of the things there, and Walnut Street on the north and south. So this is, once again, and I say several times within the videos, this is a perfect example of what these homes would have looked like. And of course, the house is rectangular in shape and consists of a cellar, main floor, and a loft. The cellar is a half cellar. I do show the outside entrance. We do not go down in it just because the stairs are so narrow and my balance is still not that great. And with only having half a foot, it can be troublesome to try to go on stairs like that. But that would have been their refrigeration. It would have been essential for life. For that's where their canned goods, their salted meats, things like that would have been stored down there just because of how much cooler it was. And as Gary shows us, there was a floorboard they could pop up and just have, probably for, they moved something from the cellar to that area for their meal of that day or something for the preparations, just to continue to keep it cool under the floor there. But it's a very small area, but it continues to be an area of the house that's much cooler than the rest. But that would be perfect for preparations and keeping things of that nature. So the first floor, like most of these homes, is sort of composed of 3 rooms, and this was a plan prevalent in Pennsylvania German architecture. The fireplace sort of rises in the general center. That's what the German houses would be like, and English ones would always be on one of the ends. It's just sort of however they did their architecture. That's how you can sort of tell the difference between whether it's German or English in nature. The hearth would be facing the kitchen, which is that first room that we'll have in the second video. Will take place in the kitchen, and the kitchen would be lighted by the means of a small like a 6 windowed window there. Whether it opens or not, I would think it would have, because most of the smoke and all that stuff's going to go up the chimney, but you would also have, potentially you'd want to get some of those odors out by opening that window. So it makes a lot of sense architecturally, just out of, utility. It would make sense to have it that way. Now, the room leading from the kitchen uh, is the Stube in German, or living room. Now, this room, there was 2 windows in the front. We'll see that in the third video. Uh, they would have had the uh, around the windows, the all that type of stuff. That would have been probably the application of that would have probably been uh, late 18th century, maybe early 19th, so 1700s and 1800s, because they really weren't going to be terribly ornate on the inside. And they do have that cool sort of almost what you would consider a chair rail, but it was more for the chest, so they weren't. It wasn't so much you were trying not to damage the log, you were trying not to damage the mortar, because if that broke apart, you get cold in and all that kind of stuff. But that room would have been essential for, in essence, the living room. But that's where you would have had the loom. So that's where you would have made your clothes. It's where you would have repaired clothes, repaired items that you needed for the farm, for around the house. They also would have had that small stove. It would have been a 5 piece uh, German plate jam stove, and that was basically that was for heat purely for that room because you spent so much time in it. And the final room would have been known as the camera or the bedroom. This would have had one window. This is where the parents would have slept, and they would have also kept any infants, very small children, like in the cradle there. And that one window was known in German culture, at least, as the spirit window. And the reason for that is Gary would explain in the third video. It's so cool. It's something I didn't know is that when you got older and you passed, tradition was that your spirit would go through that window and go to heaven. Um, and lastly, but not least, you would have the loft, and that's we'll see in the fourth video. Really, really cool. A lot of engineering things with the shingling that Gary explained. Shows us some of the shingles, and that's where the kids would have slept. I'm sure they would have some storage up there and things of that nature, but that's the basic setup of this house and its history. Once again, this probably they don't have an exact date, just because records from back then very hard to come by, but circa 1760. I've heard some dates that they think maybe a little earlier, maybe a little later, but in that general French and Indian War era period. And the timing part of it as well is because he just started divvying up the lots in 1750. It would make sense that it was in that time period of some sort. But let's go on and let's enjoy the garden.
Hey everybody, so I have decided I'm going to split this Chestnut Street log house into 5 videos, concentrating on different areas, just so it's smaller areas to digest. I sort of went on and on about, they have this paper that they gave talking about the history, the general history of this house, and I sort of went into depth about different things. So I sort of, like I do, I talk a lot, which I'll probably do here as well. But I want to split it into 5 parts. May 11th, which would have been this Saturday, Preservation Trust of Lebanon County opens up 4 historic buildings that they run. And I was able to get the one this year, which was a Chestnut Street log house. Last year, Cliff from the Wandering Woodsman channel, myself, and Lewis of Simply Exploventuring, we went to Lights Fort, the Lindley Murray Schoolhouse, Lights Fort being in Lebanon, northern Lebanon City. Uh, Lindley Murray Schoolhouse is in Fort Indian Town Gap there on Asher Minor Road, which I was hoping to get back there because the video got corrupted somehow. I was over with Sylvia and her husband, and they were showing me the video, and it was like I was having an epileptic seizure. I don't know what happened with that, but I wanted to get back there. But we will get back there at some point. And Monroe Valley Chapel, which is in the Monroe Valley, right near Lickdale. Don Moyer is responsible for saving both of those buildings with his students from northern Lebanon and a number of craftsmen from the local area that donated their time and resources. Lindley Murray is an 1850s schoolhouse, and they recreated it in that form and function. It is an amazing place as you guys see the video. If you can tolerate the shaking, I do want to go back there, and they will open it up. I can just contact Jan Morrissey, who is phenomenal. She works with both Preservation Trust of Lebanon County and with Lebanon County Historical Society. We've seen Jan several times with Lights Fort. Also, when we did the Union Canal Days, she was there. We talked to her, and also at Old Anvil Days. So we've seen Jan around quite a bit. Jan's awesome. You're awesome, Jan.
Tom Dunmore, they fixed up Lindley Murray Schoolhouse first, I think in the 70s, and then in late 80s. I remember going by Monroe Valley Chapel, and the walls, there was no roof. Squatters had been there in the 50s and basically ruined the place, ruined the cemetery in a lot of ways because there were a lot more stones there. But he went in, saw a need. They rebuilt the walls stone by stone, rebuilt the structure, took it back to where it would have been because it was, I believe, the early 1800s is when it was built. But the Monroe Valley Chapel, the original log structure, goes back into French and Indian War era because it was used, I believe, as a mission, Moravian mission, along with the Lutherans. It also was used as a place of refuge during those attacks and things that would happen. But the Chestnut Street Log House, we got a chance to go there, and what a phenomenal experience! And you guys will enjoy that as well with this 5-part series. So we're going to be doing the first one. This one is about the history of the home. I was originally going to do history and the garden together, but the history has gone longer than I would like to try to do both. I'd like to concentrate purely on the garden in part 2, talk a little bit about the Daughters of the American Revolution who maintain it, maybe go into a little bit more depth of what a colonial garden, the different features of that are, in a little more depth. Also, then part 3, we're going to concentrate on looking at the cellar. We're not going to go down in there just because the steps are too narrow for my feet. It just would be dangerous for me to try to do it. And I'm not sure how much you would see anyways. And the kitchen, because that was really the center of the home in a lot of ways, because it was your central fireplace. It's where you cooked your food. There was a lot of warmth there. There was also warmth in with the stove that was in the stube or the living room, family room, where they did a lot of stuff, because that's probably where you spent the most time. But the kitchen was, it's the hearth of the home. So that'll be part 3. Part 4, we will go into the stube, the living room, and to the Kammer, as they're known in German, which would be the main bedroom, which would be the parents' bedroom, where the smallest children would be, learn a lot of things there. And we'll finish with part 5, which will be up in the loft where the older kids would have stayed, some storage, and learn some of the cool engineering things with the shingling and actually get to see those size of those shingles as well. So this will be a really cool series we'll be seeing throughout the week and probably in the next week. I want to say a special thank you to the Historic Preservation Trust of Lebanon County, to Jan Morrissey, and everybody that volunteers and helps at these places. I would have loved to have gone to more this year, but just had some previous plans. Didn't realize it was on May 11th. Maybe I would have did things a little differently, but it was a pleasure. I got told several times the tour guides that are there at the Preservation Trust of Lebanon County there at the Chestnut Street Log House are phenomenal, and they were 100% correct. So thank you to Gary and Jerry. You guys were phenomenal. The knowledge you imparted, all this stuff that we learned. There were a couple really cool features like the Christian door, the spirit window, the engineering of the shingles and how that worked, and just overall the knowledge that they imparted about the gardens and just everything is really phenomenal. You guys will get to experience that. It was cool too seeing some of the pottery that was found when they redug the outhouse. That's would be your trash place basically. So you could find all this really ornate broken pottery, which, like Gary says, is just his favorite thing about the entire place is seeing all that unique stuff from back then. So I want you to enjoy this series. I want to say thank you for coming along. Thank you to everybody that was involved with this. You guys really do a phenomenal job, and this place is preserved for us to enjoy and for future generations. So I encourage you as well. They do open up, I believe Gary said, in June and July, every single Wednesday from 1 to 4. So you can go and visit this place yourself, the Chestnut Street Log House. It's on the Registry of Historic Places. Phenomenal place. So go check it out. And as always, we'll see you all about town. History is out there, my friends.